Stepmom's lie destroyed my life. Evicted after being falsely accused. I was 24 when everything fell apart. Fresh out of college, full of optimism and plans for the future. I had moved back home to save up some money while I searched for a job, figuring it was the practical thing to do. Little did I know, my plans for the future were about to be shattered in a way I never saw coming. Things had been tense at home for a while. Ever since Dad remarried Lisa, things had felt off. It wasn't that Lisa was outwardly unkind. She was polite enough. But there was always an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite put my finger on. A sharpness in her tone, a certain look in her eyes that made me feel like an outsider. Like I didn't belong in my own home anymore. Nate, her son, was a couple of years younger than me. We had never really gotten along. We were just different. He was more into sports and hanging out with his own group of friends, while I kept to myself. We didn't have much in common, and as time passed, we barely spoke. If there was any warmth in the house, I certainly wasn't feeling it. Dad, of course, didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he just didn't want to. Lisa and Nate care about you, he'd say when I tried to bring it up. You're overthinking things, Sam. But I wasn't overthinking. I could feel the tension every time I walked into the room. The way conversations would stop when I entered. The cold glances exchanged between Lisa and Nate when they thought I wasn't looking. It all made the house feel less like a home and more like some battlefield where I was always on the losing side. I had a plan, though. I was going to save up, find a place of my own, and get out of there as soon as I could, but I wasn't fast enough. One night, I came home after another day of job hunting, exhausted but hopeful. I was close to landing a position, and things were starting to look up. I figured the worst was behind me. But as soon as I stepped through the front door, I could feel something was wrong. Dad was sitting in the living room, his face clouded with anger. Lisa and Nate stood behind him, their expressions hard and accusatory. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel my heart start to race. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Sam," Dad said, his voice cold and distant in a way that sent a chill through me. "Pack your things. You need to leave." I blinked, stunned. "What? What do you mean? I need to leave? Why?" Lisa stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Don't play dumb, Sam. We know what you did." Confused, I glanced between them. "What are you talking about?" "The money," Dad snapped, his anger boiling over. "The money from Mate's college fund. You took it." I felt like the ground had disappeared from beneath my feet. "What? I didn't take anything. I don't even know what you're talking about." Lisa crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. "We found the expensive clothes, the electronics, all hidden in your room. Did you really think we wouldn't notice?" My heart pounded in my chest, my mind spinning. I hadn't taken a dime from anyone, let alone Nate's college fund. But as I looked at Dad's face, filled with anger and betrayal, I realized it didn't matter. He had already made up his mind. He had chosen to believe them over me. "Dad, I didn't take any money," I pleaded, my voice shaking. "I swear I didn't do anything." But he wasn't listening. His eyes were cold, his decision final. "Pack your bags and go." That was it. The man who had raised me, who I had looked up to my entire life, had turned his back on me. I left that night with nothing but a suitcase and a heart full of betrayal. Chapter 2. The Unexpected Call. It had been 5 years since the last time I spoke to my father. 5 years of complete silence. No birthday calls, no holiday texts, not even a random message to check in. Just a cold, unbroken distance between us. Over time, I convinced myself that I'd never hear from him again. And for a while, that was okay. It became normal. But then on a regular Tuesday afternoon, my phone buzzed, and the screen lit up with his name. The sight of his name hit me like a punch to the gut. For a moment, I didn't move. It didn't seem real. His name, Dad, felt like it belonged in another life, like it had no place on my screen anymore. I just stared at it, unsure what to do. A flood of emotions hit me all at once. Anger, resentment, sadness, and even a strange flicker of hope that I didn't want to admit was there. My thumb hovered over the screen, wavering. Why should I answer? After everything that had happened, after all the pain, why should I give him the chance to hurt me again? But there was something inside me, some small part that still wanted answers, that still needed closure. Maybe even that tiny part of me that still loved him, despite everything. I hesitated for just a second longer, and then I swiped to accept the call. Hello. My voice came out shakier than I wanted. I had hoped for confidence, maybe even a little indifference, but my emotions betrayed me. Hey, Sam. It's Dad. His voice was too calm, too casual, like he hadn't just dropped back into my life after half a decade. Like 5 years hadn't passed since the last time we'd spoken. I gripped the phone tighter, my heart pounding in my chest. How could he sound so normal? Didn't he realize what this was? How monumental was this moment for me? But then that was typical of him. To act like nothing was ever as big as it seemed. I wanted to talk, he said, his tone still maddeningly casual. Talk. After all this time, after everything he'd done, now he wanted to talk? I could feel my hands trembling as the memories of the last conversation we had flooded back. Memories of being thrown out of the house, of the anger in his voice, and the coldness in his eyes. I hadn't spoken to him, or to Lisa, my stepmother, or to Nate, her son, since. I had cut them all out of my life. But now, here he was, calling me as if a few words could undo years of silence and hurt. What do you want to talk about? I asked, my voice harder now. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. He didn't deserve that. There are things I need to explain, he said, and for the first time, there was a hint of something in his voice that wasn't so calm. A crack, maybe, in that calm facade. Was it guilt? Regret? I couldn't tell. A strange knot twisted in my stomach. Explain? What could he possibly explain that would make up for what he had done? For the way he had treated me? For the way he had believed them over me? I could still see it in my mind. The way he'd looked at me that day like I was a stranger, like I wasn't his son at all. Dad, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I don't think there's much left to explain. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to end the call and slam the door shut on that part of my life forever. But something in his voice, maybe it was the way he sounded older, worn down in a way I hadn't heard before, stopped me. Against my better judgment, I let him continue. Chapter 3. Surviving the Fallout. In the days that followed, I felt like I was living in a fog. Everything I thought I knew had been ripped away. I crashed on my friend Logan's couch, trying to figure out what to do next. I was 24, fresh out of school, without a job or a home, and now, without a family. The weight of it all was suffocating. This is unreal, Logan said one evening as we sat in his small apartment, staring at the TV. They just kicked you out without even listening to your side? Yeah, I muttered, my eyes unfocused, as I tried to make sense of it all. It doesn't even feel real. He shook his head, clearly as shocked as I was. You don't deserve this, Sam. You're better off without them. I nodded, but the words didn't come from me. How could they? No matter how much I told myself I didn't need them, that I was better off, it still hurt. It hurt that my own father had turned his back on me so easily. For weeks, I drifted through life. I took whatever odd jobs I could find, bartending, waiting tables, anything to make enough money to get by. But every night, as I lay on Logan's couch, the weight of everything pressed down on me like a heavy blanket. I couldn't shake the feeling of loss, the sense that I had been abandoned by the one person I thought I could always count on. The only person who seemed to understand was my aunt. She and my dad had never been particularly close, but she had always been there for me. I remember calling her late one night, my voice shaking as I told her everything that had happened. You don't deserve this, Sam, she said gently. Your father, he made a mistake, but you're strong. You'll get through this. I don't feel strong, I admitted, my voice small. I feel like I've lost everything. You haven't lost everything, she said, her voice soft but firm. You still have your future. You still have your life. Don't let what they did define you. Her words gave me a bit of comfort, but they didn't erase the ache in my chest. Every day felt like a battle just to keep going, but somehow I did. Little by little, I started to rebuild. I found a job as a graphic designer at a small agency and eventually saved enough to get my own apartment. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Still, no matter how much I tried to move on, the wound my father had left behind never fully healed. And then, out of nowhere, he called. Chapter 4. A Bitter Apology. I wasn't sure why I agreed to meet him. Maybe part of me still wanted answers. Maybe I needed to hear him say he was sorry. Or maybe I just wanted to see him one more time to finally put everything behind me. Whatever the reason, I found myself sitting in a small cafe, waiting for the man who had once been my hero, but now felt like a stranger. When he walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked older and more tired than I remembered. There were more lines on his face, and the confident posture I had once associated with him was gone, replaced by a man who seemed weighed down by the years. He sat across from me, and for a long time, neither of us spoke. I didn't know where to start. Should I demand an apology? Should I ask him why he had believed them over me? Before I could decide, he spoke. "Sam," he said, his voice quiet, "I'm sorry." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with years of unresolved pain. After all this time, after everything, here it was, the apology I had longed for. But now that it was here, it didn't feel the way I had imagined. It wasn't satisfying. It wasn't enough. "Why didn't you believe me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you even give me a chance?" He looked down at his hands, fidgeting with the edge of the napkin in front of him. "I don't know," he admitted. I let Lisa get into my head. I was stupid. I didn't. You didn't even listen," I said, my voice rising with the anger I had kept bottled up for so long. "You just threw me out like I was nothing." "I know," he said softly, his voice filled with regret. "And I regret it, every day." There was a long silence between us. I had waited years to hear him say those words, but they didn't heal the wounds he had left behind. They didn't make the pain go away. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said finally, the words heavy on my heart. He nodded, his face filled with sorrow. "I understand," he said quietly, "but I needed you to know that I'm sorry." For a moment, I almost felt pity for him. He looked so small, so broken. But then, just as I was about to respond, he added, I need your help with something." Chapter 5. A Selfish Request. I should have known there was more to this meeting. The apology, the regret, it was all just a prelude to what he really wanted. "I'd filed for divorce from Lisa," he said, his eyes pleading with me. "But things are messy. I need a good lawyer, and I thought maybe you could help me get in touch with your friend's dad, the attorney." I stared at him, disbelief washing over me. After everything, after all the pain he had caused, this was what he wanted. Help with his divorce. "You got to be kidding," I said, my voice flat. "You want my help after everything you put me through?" He looked taken aback, as if he hadn't expected me to react this way. "I know I hurt you, Sam, but I'm trying to make things right. By asking me for a favor," I scoffed, shaking my head. "This isn't about making things right. You're only here because you need something from me." "That's not true," he protested, but his voice lacked conviction. I stood up, pushing my chair back. "I can't do this, Dad. I can't just pretend like nothing happened." Without another word, I walked out of the cafe, leaving him behind. Chapter 6. A Mother's Guidance. Later that evening, I found myself sitting in my apartment, replaying the conversation in my head. I couldn't believe the nerve he had, asking for my help after everything he had done. Just as I was about to pour myself a drink, my phone buzzed. It was my aunt. "I heard you met with your father today," she said cautiously. "Yeah," I replied, not in the mood to talk about it. "And I heard you refused to help him." She continued, a hint of disappointment in her voice. "Of course I did," I snapped. "He doesn't deserve my help. After what he did to me. After he threw me out without a second thought." "I know," she said softly, "but maybe he's trying to make amends now. Maybe this is his way of trying to fix things." "Fix things?" I laughed bitterly. "He didn't even apologize properly. All he cares about is his divorce. That's why he called." She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was gentle but firm. "Sam, I understand why you're angry. You have every right to be. But holding on to that anger, it's only going to hurt you in the end." "I'm not holding on to anything," I said defensively. "I'm moving on." But the truth was, I wasn't moving on. The apology, as hollow as it had felt, had stirred up feelings I thought I had buried. Suddenly, all the old wounds were open again, and I didn't know how to deal with them. Chapter 7. Wrestling with the Past. For the next few days, I couldn't shake the conversation with my dad. His apology, his request, everything kept replaying in my mind. I had thought I'd moved on from it all, but now it felt like I was right back where I had been 5 years ago, angry, hurt, and confused. Every time I tried to focus on something else, the memories came flooding back. I thought about the day he threw me out, the betrayal I had felt when he believed Lisa and Nate over me. I thought about the years I had spent struggling to build a life for myself without him. And I thought about the part of me that had once idolized him, the part of me that still, even after everything, wanted his approval. But how could I forgive him? How could I let go of everything he had done? And yet, my aunt's words kept echoing in my mind. Holding on to that anger, it's only going to hurt you. Was she right? Was I hurting myself by holding on to the past? Was it time to let go? Chapter 8. An Unexpected Visitor. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so when I opened it and saw Lisa standing there, I was stunned. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice cold. "I need to talk to you," she said quickly, glancing around nervously. She looked scared. For a moment, I considered slamming the door in her face, but something in her expression stopped me. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside and let her in. She stood awkwardly in the middle of my apartment, looking around as if she was expecting someone to jump out and attack her. Finally, she spoke. "Sam, I know you hate me," she began, her voice trembling, "and I don't blame you, but there's something you need to know." I crossed my arms, waiting for her to get to the point. "Your father and I are divorcing, but it's not just because of the things you think," she said, her voice shaky. "There's more to the story." I raised an eyebrow. "What are you talking about?" "Your father. He's been hiding things from everyone, not just from you. There's a reason he believed me so easily back then." My heart raced as I waited for her to continue, but nothing could have prepared me for what she said next. Chapter 9. The truth comes out. "The truth is," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper, "your father was hiding his own secret. He was having an affair with someone. That's why he was so quick to believe me. He didn't want his own secret to come out." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me again. My father had been having an affair? That was the reason he had thrown me out. To protect his own lies? Who? I asked, my voice hoarse. Who was he having an affair with? Lisa looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "It was someone close to you." Chapter 10. A Decision to Make. In the days that followed, I struggled to process everything. The betrayal was deeper than I had ever imagined. Not only had my father thrown me out, but he had done it to protect his own lies. Lies that had torn our family apart. I felt like I was drowning in the weight of it all. The anger, the hurt, the confusion, it was too much. But at the same time, there was a strange sense of relief. The truth was finally out, and I didn't have to wonder anymore. I didn't have to waste any more energy on trying to understand why he had done what he did. Now I knew. And with that knowledge came a sense of clarity. I didn't need him in my life. I didn't need to forgive him, and I didn't need his approval. It was time to let go, for real this time. I made the decision to cut ties with him completely. No more calls, no more meetings, no more trying to fix what was broken. I needed to focus on my own life, on the people who truly cared about me. Slowly, I started to move forward. I threw myself into my work, into building a life that I could be proud of. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free.